think we're on. Yeah, I think I hear a little echo of my angelic voice. All right. Let's open with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you that you brought both John and Adam safely to us through the traffic and the chaos, and that they were able to join us and be part of our worship service. We miss everyone who's not here, and we patiently await those that are on their way to us, whether this week or in the future. We pray that as we discuss your word today, that it reflects a note of what you want us to share with the world, and that we can learn from it today. In your name we pray, amen. All right, so you get two speakers today. Mason, can you turn the children's story microphone on, purple? Brooke, will you come up here with me, please? Sweet. Right. It's fun how God works, because I'm going to talk to you a little bit about trauma today. And our biblical reference or study is going to be Daniel. So we just heard a little bit about Daniel, and I'm going to be careful not to spoil part 2 of Adam's continuing children's saga. But first I'm going to tell you a little bit about trauma. Now, the average person witnesses in their lifetime 2 to 4 traumatic events. There's been numerous studies, numerous surveys, and the average person sees at most about 4 events of trauma. Police officers, on the other hand, anyone want to guess? What do we have? 100. It is 400 to 600 traumatic events throughout their career, and 3.5 events every 6 months. So I'm going to be careful not to form this talk into, oh my goodness, we need pity. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is to understand what trauma is, how it affects you, how it affects those around you, and then does the Bible give us any guidance on how to handle it? That's what we're trying to accomplish today. So I brought Brooke up because no one has been a more front seat witness to me in my processing of trauma than this wonderful, wonderful lady here. For 25 years, every day I've been a cop, I have come home to her. So, but let's talk a little bit more about what police officers deal with. So officers are 2 to 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with PTSD. What they suffer from, or symptoms they suffer from, are poor sleep quality. Do I have poor sleep quality?
Yes.
Okay. This is a great one because she gets to say no to this. High alcohol abuse?
No.
Perfect. Post-traumatic symptoms also include re-experiencing events often without warning.
Yes.
Okay. Avoidance of memory triggers like smells, sounds, and conversations.
That one is true for you.
Mood swings.
At times.
Okay. Fair. There are many other issues that we could throw out there, right? If we were to get into all the PTSD symptoms, most police officers, and let's be fair, all first responders, paramedics, EMTs, firemen, and our soldiers. The difference is, and if you were to talk to our military members, they would tell you this. I've had conversations with guys who have been in it. I have friends who are SEAL team members. And one of the things that this one particular friend said, yeah, but you have it worse at times because I get to come home from the chaos and I get to decompress. I am safe when I am home. You go to it every day of your career. You have that hypervigilance every day. So there's a difference between what first responders deal with and how they deal with it than our military. Military deals with it while they're there, whether that's a 6-month, a year, and don't get me wrong, it is extremely intense. What they witness, what they deal with is on a whole nother level. But they do get more substantial time to process and decompress from that before they have to face the next one. So many officers choose to carry this burden alone. We're seeing this. It's been a stigma. When I first started my career, I had a friend of mine who I went to the academy with, who worked for Denton PD. He made some choices that were counterproductive to his career. He had some home chaos, probably because of the job. And he ended up shooting himself in the front yard. Probably because his name was Sean. Probably because Sean was processing that all by himself. Because there was a stigma associated with law enforcement and first responders that you had to be the alpha male, you have to be tough. And we don't talk about that. You pack it down, you put it in the file cabinet, you move on. You don't have to open that drawer ever again. Right? Sound like kind of like the way our military guys handle things? Right? Well, men and women now, for sure, because they're seeing it all. So not sharing it with those closest to them, and probably not with anyone at all. They probably aren't seeing any type of therapist or anything like that. And we fall into this notion that if you're not a cop, you just wouldn't understand. Anyone ever had that kind of conversation when you're talking with someone about your job or your experiences and go, well, you just wouldn't understand. You don't do what I do. You didn't experience what I experienced, so you just wouldn't understand. But is that really true? I don't feel like it is. I feel like while I'm a cop and you guys may not understand the thought process in the moment that I'm going through, I think that you can take that scenario, process it with how you've processed something that was just as intense for you, and offer some type of feedback. I think that's a very, very real possibility, and we need to be open to that idea. But I've experienced this myself. Telling someone how I've handled a situation, I get a lot of responses from people who aren't police officers like, well, you need to be careful doing that, or you shouldn't have done that. And it's happened so much to the point that I just don't share anymore. I don't feel like the lecture. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing the job for 25 years. And again, you're not a cop. You wouldn't understand. One of the things we have to weigh in law enforcement that most of your first responders don't is we are violating people's rights whenever we interact with them. It's the truth. But we're doing it legally. You have to have a reason to do it. Our officers across this nation are experts in understanding the law. I find it funny when a lawyer gets on TV and tells you how they interpret the thing, the event, whatever it was. My experience with lawyers, not all of them, but they are experts in the manipulation of the law, not in the usage of the law. Police officers have to be experts in the usage of the law because when they get in front of the lawyers and the judges who are experts in spinning interpretation, they had to be able to justify what they did. Did you know there's a law now in place with the Maryland Police Reform Act that says if I, as a police officer, fail to fully investigate any crime, that means just missing the smallest iota, I can go to jail? That's what our legislators in Annapolis did. That's what Montgomery County, PG County, and Baltimore counties' political mindset created. And that's where we are in law enforcement. So you have that stress. I'm talking about the things that start to build on the stresses that we experience. And the reason Brooke is standing up here so patiently is she's waiting to have some input on this. But I have my reasons for choosing not to share. I choose to protect those closest to me from the knowledge of what has happened. I choose to protect myself from their judgment. Self-preservation, right? I'm choosing to protect the case or the incident because I can't share details with people. The case has to be protected, even after the fact. I'm going to share some things today that Brooke has more knowledge than you guys are going to have. We're going to be vague about a few things. But my trauma that I've experienced involves other people where it was probably more traumatic for them. They lost a loved one. They experienced it. They were right there when it happened. So I'm going to be careful because I'm not going to put myself where they are on their trauma because I feel like they suffered more, right? So let's discuss the ramifications of this by using Brooke Larimore as my sounding board. So from the time I started this career, have you recognized changes in me?
Yes.
Positive?
Some.
Negative.
More.
I told her to be blatantly honest. We need that for this to make sense, right? All right, so let's see if you've recognized some of these things. I mean, we're gonna hit on some of this. This we did not discuss last night, but this is real easy, okay?
Yeah.
Hypervigilance.
Yes. He
Describe
has
it.
to sit and position himself to make sure he has exits seen. He has to know where everyone is, and he has to have a plan anywhere we go.
Ever notice that I always put myself between my family and potential problems?
Yes.
Okay. That's kind of like a man thing. If you grew up in a family that was more chivalrous and taught that kind of thing, I know a lot of men will walk on the street side or the sidewalk. Did you know that they used to walk on the other side? Did you know that? That men used to walk on the house side of the sidewalk? You know why? Because when people would throw things out, like their bathroom buckets, the men wanted to make sure the women didn't suffer that indignity. So they would take it so the woman could stay clean and nice. So chivalry's been around for a long time, thankfully. Processing intense experiences. I guess my question would be,
Do you shut down during them?
yeah.
Yes.
And what does that shutdown look like?
Usually you're just mostly on your tag. Go to bed early, but yet don't sleep. Don't do much talking and communicating. We don't go out and do anything really. We kind of just stay home.
Okay. What about how easily I switch from work mind to home mind and then back?
You've developed a better skill at it, but it took a while.
So when I talk about this, I'm going to explain to you what happens. Is, like right now, I have a desk job. I still have stresses. But Brooke will tell me on Monday, you're starting to think about work. So what you have to do as a first responder is you start putting, we have armor that we wear. It's mental armor. You learn to do it. You start to put that armor on about 12 hours before you go to work. So for me, it's about 4 hours before I go to sleep the night before. And then when I wake up in the morning, Brooke gets a hug and a kiss. And there's another thing. My physical contact with her becomes more formal when I'm police-minded. It's a quick hug, it's a quick kiss, and I'm out the door. It's not that loving embrace because I am now in my armor. So she'll tell me the day leading up to it, you're starting to think about work. What makes you think that I'm thinking about work?
As you stated, the distancing, you get more one-track mind, communication changes.
So we're tracking this pretty good. How about turning my emotions off? We talked about this last night. You brought this up.
You usually, anytime I'm feeling there's something disapproving between us, you just shut down and don't add into the emotion that I might have. So you treat me as if I'm a criminal or I'm a criminal situation, and it's no emotion and just communication stops, sleep on it, try again tomorrow.
Okay. And to be fair, since we're probably on Facebook Live, I want to mention that some of those talking points I just had, I took in order from an article written by Rochelle Zimlock. She's a psychological doctor. And she writes a lot of articles that are published in Police One and things like that. So this was a trauma article, and talking about, the article was actually called, "Why is my first responder ignoring me?" So one of the things that she highlights here about turning off emotionally, anyone wonder why a first responder would turn off emotionally? Anyone have an idea as to why? Julie? Yeah. Yeah, we have to detach ourselves from the scenario we're in. You ever watch Dragnet and just the facts, ma'am? Right? It's an old black and white. I'm taking you back. But just the facts. We deal with just the facts. You show up at a domestic, and it is bad, and they're yelling, and you separate them, and they're like, you don't understand. I don't need to understand. I need to see the marks. I need to collect the evidence, and I will be making an arrest before I leave here. We can be empathetic somewhat, but we can't allow that empathy or the emotions to control our decision making, because then we get in trouble. And now that everything is on body cam, you certainly can't, because they will second guess you every day of the week. All right, so these changes that you've recognized, when did you first recognize change in me? In my 25-year career.
Change, like, from before you were a police officer?
Yes.
Or probably a few years in, maybe not even a few years in. It was pretty quick.
Okay. And we've kind of talked about the changes that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you coming to me when we were still living in Golden. So at that time, we moved out of Golden when Mason was almost 5 years old. So Mason's 23 now. So 18 years ago, and about 7 years into my career, she came to me and said, you're kind of cynical.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't used to be that way. And I had to recognize that. It's kind of hard to hear that from the person who matters most to you. But I had to recognize that, right? So when witnessing my processing of traumatic events, how has it affected you? How did it make you feel?
Well, I always felt that it was me. I did something wrong because I
Okay.
didn't know something was bothering him from work.
Okay.
And I didn't realize he would tell me a little snippet about his day, and I wouldn't realize, because of how he would word it, that it even affected him in any way, if he was even present at it. But then he would kind of retreat into himself, and you could feel that pulling when you're that close to someone, that something's changed.
So has there been growth in how I've dealt with
Yes.
intense situations?
It's taken 20 plus years and constant reminders and constant patience on both of our sides.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So now what we're going to do is, I'm not going to give you a lot of detail. We're going to discuss some of the what I would consider trauma. Keep in mind, these are, I hate to say highlights, because they're not something that you really want to be like, wow, you're not going to believe this one. And it's always funny when people come up and they're like, or what's the craziest thing you've seen? Like, we're kind of the same. Worse is crazy. Crazy is worse. And it's, what is worse? Is it the traffic accident where there's a fatality? Or is it the child abuse? Is it watching someone suffer where you can't pull them out of it mentally? Or is it an intense fight that you're having with the suspect? It changes day to day, right? Changes on the mindset you're able to approach your day with. It changes based on what you experienced yesterday, and what you experienced yesterday changes how you respond to it, right? We are all the total sum of our experiences. So, very early on, my very first summer, we had a shooting where the suspect shot someone, ran into a house. We were right there and chased him into the house. I was standing about 10 foot from him with a wall separating us when he shot himself. He ended up being one of my high school graduate classmates. What I remember about him is a very quiet, kind person. So my question to you, Brooke, is when we discussed this last night, I kind of prepped her for this so she'd be ready. When did I talk to you about the event?
I don't even recall it, so I don't remember if you did.
I do remember telling her about it. I didn't tell her about him being a high school classmate until
Last night, or that you were feet from it till last night.
Okay. So this one doesn't apply, but how did you see me physically or mentally affected? Can't really gauge that, can we?
Can't, it was too long ago, 25 years ago.
What were you able to do to help me?
Nothing.
Okay. So how does that affect you?
Well, how it affected me now probably affected me back then. It's my fault, wasn't doing enough. Maybe you're upset with me. Maybe I didn't do something correctly to help you.
Now remember, I said there's differences in the types of calls, right? What should be traumatic might not be, and what should be just a day affects me greatly. So The crowd control issue.
Yes. That one did affect you.
How quickly did I tell you about it?
I can't remember if you called me after it settled down or you waited till you got home, but it was within the 24 hours.
Okay.
And I mentioned that you needed to reach out to a superior.
So how did you see me physically or mentally affected?
It was, you had a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, frustration, short-tempered, short fuse,
So let me
closed up.
give you some detail on this. This I can talk to you about. We had a situation in the middle of COVID where we had suddenly a very large gathering. We knew it was going to happen. We had intel on it. I was in charge of the work group that night. I had told my superior, hey, you understand that I am now understaffed because I allowed one of my guys to have off not knowing about this event when he had known about it with enough time for me not to approve that time off. And his response was, well, you're just going to have to deal with it, which is fine. I had myself and I had a full work group. I had 4 or 5 guys. So we had like 6 of us. And we were monitoring. We had surveillance on it. So I had a live feed of the area. I was watching it. I had officers going by every 15 minutes, starting at 4 p.m. At about between 8:15 and 8:30, what was a completely empty street turned into 400 people in 15 minutes. We watched them just, and we're not talking people. We're talking a full DJ table, nice little setup, in an area, and this was the night before an annual event in that neighborhood that had to be canceled because of COVID, because we shut everything down. So you have an expectation. People have been pent up for 8 or 9 months. This is an annual cultural celebration event that everyone attended. And you're telling them you can't have that event. So they said, you know what? Let's get together the night before in their own neighborhood. So my solution was, it's their neighborhood. I'm just going to block off the streets and let them do it safely. That's a reasonable compromise, I thought. So I did it. Started getting phone calls from my superior who was watching the same camera system. He's cussing at me. You better get this stuff handled. I said, what do you want me to do? So you need to shut it down. You want me to shut down a 400, 500, and it was growing, party with 5 officers. It's like, yeah, call the state police and the sheriff's department. So now 9 officers, because they each have 2 working. Well, you'll have to call in other agencies. Well, that becomes an all-call, Wycomico County, Ocean City. Who knows when they'll get there. For people hanging out. And the interesting thing was, the crowd, I grew up in Easton. Everyone my age, I know. I'm getting hugs and handshakes from people who are my friends, who I regularly interact with. I'm glad to see you. Well, my only option was to cut the music. I was given no choice. I cut the music. I became the enemy of that entire group immediately. And, you know, the comments changed from glad to see you to there are people I didn't recognize who were from Wilmington and Baltimore telling me that when I turned my back, they were going to kill me. We're going to take you out. I'm not going to run scared. I'm going to just turn and look at them and go, well, I'm standing right here. Let's do it. I've got to maintain my authority. All that's happening, and I'm watching the other 5 officers around me just like. And do you know the end result of that was we had some massive fights. We had to throw pepper spray into entire groups of people. We did have to call the state police and the sheriff's department in after I took action. Whereas if I had let them go till 11, 12 o'clock, let them go another hour or so and be like, hey, it's time. I'm going to give you till 12 o'clock. Go ahead and shut it down. Because that's what I told the DJ already. They were good with that. But my solution did not meet the needs of my superior at the time. and he wouldn't listen and wouldn't compromise. So that being said, you already said you saw me physically and mentally affected. Can you dive into that a little bit as to the next day, how I handled that? Do you remember that?
You just didn't sleep. You kept the anxiousness and grew angry, and you felt unprotected, unsupported, and you felt put in a situation that could have been very dangerous. And you were about ready to quit right then.
And I'll tell you this, that one of my officers did quit over that. He had a psychological breakdown. He could not return to work, and he quit the job over that. A viable 7 or 8 year officer who we invested time, money, and effort into quit because he felt the same way. And he couldn't process it enough to stay in the job. He's a great guy. Him and I still talk regularly. Okay. So I've taken up enough time kind of talking about these. I'm going to run through some other things that I have experienced. Just so you know, there is a plethora of different kinds of experiences. Multiple suicides, many of them violent. Infant deaths. Let's talk about one more suicide.
Uh-huh.
The Route 51.
Yeah.
We're going to be careful, not going to tell you details of it, but a car chase came into town, stopped right in the middle of our intersection, and the person being chased ended up shooting themselves. So, how was I affected?
I didn't know a lot of it until later on. So again, you clammed up and lost sleep and became distant, and you struggled through it.
The same superior, I had told him on Tuesday, you know you're leaving me with 3 people on a Friday night, and I have a trainee in the car with me. Our minimum manpower is 4 without trainees. So I'm already 1 man below, and I'm distracted training the person in the car with me. I told him that on Tuesday. He told me on Tuesday, you just got to deal with it. He made no effort to get me additional manpower. On Monday, I was called into the office for a debrief, and he tried to go at me. He tried to damage my career. And I was ready for that. I had a ton of talking points written up in a memo where he had failed. And he made the mistake of letting me talk first. And I put my points out there, and that ended the conversation. I was able to get out in front of it. But imagine the stress I have having already dealt with this superior. Now I have this next event, and I know how it's going to go. Does that add stress to it? With every decision you make in that moment? And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I can tell you that that was the most chaotic scene I have been on in 25 years. I have never had that many factors to consider in a 10-minute window. It was insane. So, Brooke, you can, let me make sure I don't have any more questions for you. One more question for you. 2 more. In your opinion, am I in a position to handle these events in a healthy manner?
Work-related? Yes.
Okay. Have you ever been frustrated or felt helpless because I wouldn't open up and let you help?
For the last 25 years, yes.
Okay.
Well, I guess you've gotten better the last couple of years, but.
Yep. Thank you. So one of the other things I want to share with you is, I told you I grew up in Easton. So a lot of these traumatic events involve people I know. Suicides of young people I coached in track. Accidents involving family members of people who I grew up with and having to go give them notification. That's a tough thing to have to continue to pack into that file cabinet, right? So, we've taken about 15 minutes discussing police trauma. And I want you to understand that I'm only talking to you about police trauma. I'm not trying to put it up here like, wow, woe is us. Because everyone has their trauma. Everyone has the events they have to process. I'm just talking to you from my experiences, okay? So how did I get here, and how do I handle my stress? So Brooke kind of talked to you about how I'm negatively affected, how I shut down and things like that. Let me tell you how Timmy in his wonderful intelligence, handles some of his stress. First, TV and tech. I'll turn the brain off and tune everything out. She already told you that. I shut down. This doesn't really work well, to be perfectly honest, because most of my video feeds are job-related or politics. And that does nothing but heighten my anxieties. And a lot of times, Brooke will see me, I'll have earphones in, and just based on my physical presence, she'll get my attention and go, you need to stop watching that. Because she's watching me. The other one is, another coping mechanism is music. Either playing, writing, or listening. Music is my peace, right? Because I exclusively listen to Christian music for the most part, and it helps me put my mind in the right mental position. It helps me allow God in. It starts to soften me. Fishing. Brooke and I have been into fishing for the last 5 years or so, since COVID. And we bought kayaks, and I love it because I get to get on the river. The last 2 times we've been on the river, we have seen no people. I work on my own time. I do what I want when I want. I throw the rod here, cast here. I cast there. I float down the river. I do what I want when I want. And guess what? The biggest thing? No decision making. I make up to 20 to 30 decisions a day that affect the community of Easton in the highest caliber. And when I get home, I don't even want to decide what to put in my stomach. I don't want to make decisions. That's part of that you shut down, you don't communicate. Bro, go, what do you want for dinner? Yeah, anybody ever heard of a wish sandwich? 2 slices of bread and a piece of cheese in between, and you wish you'd put more effort into it? That's a wish sandwich. That is a go-to for me. Yeah. Another way that I process is silence. My car ride to and from work oftentimes is without the radio on. I think I've told you that before, where I spend my time kind of in solitude, in prayer, and preparing myself either for the day or processing what's happened. It takes me 14 minutes to go 12 miles. So it's a very short amount of time. So there are plenty of times where I walk in the door and Brooke's like, how was your day? It was good. Go get changed. And she knows, kind of let him do his thing. We'll do a quick kiss and I'll go about doing what I do. And she knows that it usually takes until we're in bed at about 9 o'clock before, and she'll ask again, how was your day? What happened? And it's not because she's nosy. It's because she knows I have things I need to process, which is wonderful. Which brings me to my last coping mechanism. And keep in mind here that God is omnipresent in my life. So I believe God is, for the most part, guiding me on these coping mechanisms. I turn to prayer a lot. Like I said, I spend my time to and from work in prayer. Talked earlier from the pulpit that how many times do I see an event occur and all I do is just immediately go, Lord, please help that person. Like that person needs help. So my go-to is to turn to God, but God has given me a wonderful wife and 2 wonderful kids, and my safety net and my most productive solution is just simply being in the home with them. That is my best coping mechanism. I can do anything as long as I have Brooke next to me. I really don't care what we're doing. Yeah, I remember my parents, when we were younger, it was nothing to get in the car and drive all day. And I'm like, ah. Our car didn't have a radio. I'd take a book. We didn't have air conditioning, so you roll with the windows down. In all fairness, we'd never had air conditioning, so I didn't know what that was. But I understand it now. Just being in the presence of your favorite person is a coping mechanism. It's an opportunity to relax and be at peace. And you get to clear the slate, clear the table, and talk about whatever you want to talk about. You kind of got a captive audience, right? It's good stuff. So, now I've talked about mine. Do we believe in the world today? I have a room of people here who aren't police officers. Are we experiencing more trauma today in the world? Yeah. Is our access to media and information driving that? Think about it. 30 years ago, if an earthquake occurred in an Indonesian island, did we hear about it right away? Or was it on the Sunday paper going, hey, by the way, 7.6 on this island? And you're like, oh, wow, 7.6. They felt it in California. I remember my world being more peaceful when I was a child. And I used to think that was just, that's the benefit of being a child. But I don't think that anymore. I've dealt with enough of, we have a lot of stress on our youth today. Bullying in school that they can't get away from because of social media. They wake up and it's there. Before they go to bed, they check one more time and it's there. People who are their friends today are not their friends tomorrow. And then there's a back and forth. Skylar experienced this. Yeah. So frustrated, she just wanted out of school. And kudos to you, because you didn't just want out of school, you created a plan, a career plan that gave you an immediate future. I'm very proud of you for doing that. That's how you handled your stress and your trauma. So, is there guidance in the Bible about how to handle trauma? Yeah. And I got thinking, there's so many examples. Esther, did she have trauma? Yeah. You imagine being in her shoes? Job? Did Job suffer? Yeah. Moses? Yeah. But I for some reason, Daniel stuck in my head. So let's turn to Daniel. We're going to do a quick study of Daniel, okay? Chapter 1, if you want to follow along. If not, you can listen. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to move pretty quick. If we turn to chapter 1, we learn that Daniel was taken captive after, as Adam described this morning, a battle with Babylon. So my first question to you, in those first 7 verses, and we know Daniel was taken captive, was that traumatic? Because he was removed from his home, was he not? Did he stay with his family? Did he stay with his friends? We don't know that they were friends beforehand, do we? They probably became friends over shared stress. Right? This is, hey, do you miss home? Yeah, me too. Let's be friends. Right? So, Daniel's taken from his home by force. If you lose a battle, is it safe to say that a lot of people died? Your entire kingdom was demolished, and they took the pick of the litter to go back with them. Right? So, you're the pick of the litter because you're so smart, and you're so good looking, and you're so strong. They go, you're coming with us. Kill them. Is that traumatic to experience? Do you think there was some begging going on? Please don't, I'll go with you. Doesn't matter. Do you think when he got to Babylon, he was happy with his living conditions and what he experienced and how they conducted themselves? Wouldn't it be traumatic to go to a world where they don't have the beliefs that you have, where they have multiple gods, they don't have a focus on monogamous relationships, that they mock God instead of praising God, that they do whatever they want? They're all narcissistic, right? Was that traumatic for Daniel to experience? I would say so. But if we were to look at verse 8, we're going to see our first hints at how Daniel handled his stress. It says, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself. So remember, Adam told us this morning that they were trying to force them to eat the food of the region, to eat what they called the king's best, right? Wine, lots of meat, let's make them strong. But Daniel had a belief. He had faith in God, and God had told him how to eat. He had told his people how they should behave and how they should provide nutrients to their body. And it says, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. So, Daniel relied on God here, did he not? His faith in God was so strong that he felt brave enough to go, hey, I don't want to eat that food. And then God immediately gave him a little break, didn't he? He found favor with the person in charge of Daniel. And the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. So this guy says, hey, no. I'm going to die if I let you do that, because the king's going to immediately notice the difference. So Daniel then says to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over him. So now the chief official said, nah, I'm not playing that game. So then Daniel goes to the guard, like, hey, man, can we work something out here? And he had his 3 friends, who ended up becoming Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He said, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed. So Daniel said, just give us 10 days. Anyone here ever tried to diet? Diet. Yeah. Decide, I'm going to take it serious this time. Nothing but vegetables. We'll do that juicing diet. I'm going to do that. You know what? I'm going to get on the exercise bike. Is 10 days enough to see results? Just not to feel results, to see results. Remember that the results were seen in 10 days, and they were noticeable compared to the other men. How amazing is that? I think you could see some different coloration in the face. Maybe what you see is an improvement of attitude. You know, anyone ever eat a bunch of bad food and be like, ugh, the whole food coma thing? As opposed to if you eat lighter, have a salad, a little bit of protein with it, and you're like, I feel good today. I ate just enough. I have the energy I need. I'm ready to attack the day. So they agreed. And verse 15 says, at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So these are also, could be young men who have been prisoner for a bit, have been taken care of, are considered the prize picks, and yet within 10 days, just by what they ate, Daniel and his 3 friends were able to show that they were better taken care of with their faith in God and how he told them to eat. So the guard took away their choice food and wine, and they were to drink, and gave them vegetables instead. So these 4 men, here we see another way that his faith was rewarded. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all things of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kind. So the faith in God was rewarded. Daniel had trauma, he had stress, he turned to God, and God answered. Not only did he answer, he rewarded. So when God answered, he gave the end result, right? The healthy bodies, the healthy look, gave him the result he was looking for. That wasn't the reward. The reward was what came later. The ability, because of his willing to clear his mind with his faith, and by adhering to a diet that kept his mind healthy, he was able to understand visions. He was able to learn. Him and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego all learned at a much higher level. So let's go to Daniel 3. Because Daniel, here's the thing about trauma too, right? God doesn't, when you get through trauma, are you done? Are you never going to experience stress or trauma ever again? God doesn't promise that you're not going to experience the heartaches of this world. What does he promise? That you won't do it alone, right? That's very important here. So God promises you won't do it alone. If we go to Daniel chapter 3, we're not going to read it verse for verse because I don't want to have to read the whole chapter. But here we have the image of gold in the fiery furnace. Now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to turn on a dime when they heard the music of the land. Remember, the decree was, when you hear the lyres and the trumpets and the drums, you are supposed to, whatever you're doing, turn, face where that statue is, and drop down to your knees and celebrate who? Nebuchadnezzar, right? And it was reported back to the king that 3 men refused to do so. And what was the result? Fiery furnace, right? Now, they threw him in a furnace, but before they threw him in the furnace, they made it 4 times hotter than it was supposed to be. And they threw them in there bound. And let's take Daniel's perspective for a minute, because Daniel is the writer of this book. He knows of it. He probably witnessed it. Is that traumatic for him? To know that my friends are keeping their faith. I know in my heart of hearts that God's will is going to win out. But I don't know that God's will is for them to survive this. Right? So he watches his friends. They're captive. They're in a strange land. He's now created new friendships, and these are my boys. This is what I have left of my land, of my family, of all that I know, aside from my God. But these are the tangible things I have left to hold on to, and now they're being thrown into a furnace. I'm feeling a certain way about that, you know? Like, I love you guys. I hope to see you on the other side of this. You know? I don't know that, I think Daniel would tell us if he had had the power or the opportunity to intercede on their behalf, to petition or anything like that. So I don't think that happened. But anyway, they go into the fiery furnace. We know that it's so hot that what happens to the guards closest? They fall over from the heat and die, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I feel heat that becomes a little bit too hot to handle, I kind of do one of these. My thought would be, if the king's going to kill me for not standing close enough to that fire, and it's so hot I can't stand it, I don't need to worry about those guys inside the furnace. Like, come on, man, what are we doing here? So, on the back end of that, they trusted God to be with them. And one of the great instances in the Bible that God was actually with them, correct? Because how many people did they put in the furnace? And how many did the king see? The king saw 4 people. Wow. So God, they relied on God. God answered their prayers. And then, was there a reward? Because the reward wasn't survival, was it? Because if we go far enough into the book, the reward in verse 28. And then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. There's a big reward there. Nebuchadnezzar recognized the King of Kings, that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was the God of all gods, that there's no other God who can do what he does. And for their faithfulness and their willingness to defy him rather than kill them, he rewarded them. He promoted them within the province. So they stuck with God, and God rewarded them. God's not rewarding every traumatic event, is he? I don't think that is a fair expectation of him. Let's turn to Daniel chapter 6. This is the easy one. I don't want to take fire away from Adam's story. But Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, was he not? Why? For defying loyalty to the king, right? Again. Yeah, and it was a choice of his, right? To face east, right? And to pray to God. And for that reason, he was seen doing that. There was a plot against him. They found an opportunity, they reported it, and they were all happy. We're going to see Daniel die. They maintained their faith, or Daniel maintained his faith, and he was thrown in the lion's den. And I think at this point, it's pretty fair to say at this point in his life, Daniel's kind of like, meh, I got the big guy. Like, what are you going to do to me? How many times do we have to do this? This is getting kind of old, but all right, it's another chance to witness. I'm going to go hang out with the kitty cats. Let's go do it. Yeah. This one's called Fluffy, and this one's called Furry, and we'll have some fun. So what happens when he comes out of the lion's den? Do you guys remember? What was the king's response when Daniel was seen unharmed in the lion's den? Now these lions, one of the great things about the lion's den is to make sure that the person suffers, they don't feed them. They make sure they're hungry. And when a big lion comes at you, you run, right? What does a cat do when you dangle a little toy and do one of those with it? You ever seen them? Boom! Anyone got a laser for a cat? That is a fun time. You don't have to move. You just up the wall over there. Well, now you got live prey. It's in the form of a human, and they're scrambling all over the place, and the cat's going, meow. Let's play. So you entice them, you enact their prey drive, and they go have a meal. So Daniel has not lion, but lions. They're all hungry. And when they come in, are the lions upset? They were at peace, weren't they? Just chilling with them. It's an amazing story. But let me find where I'm looking for here. So Daniel comes out of the lion's den. He said in verse 21, the king had called down to him, and he answers, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king. How interesting was it that Daniel was able to live a life in the land of Babylon where he stayed completely obedient to God, but never worked against the king of Babylon either? Is that possible to do in today's world? It must be, because Daniel did it. But can you imagine, with the political scene today, staying true to God, and yet, if a president decrees we do a certain thing, still being able to stay in God's parameters? And yet Daniel was able to navigate that. Must have been extremely intelligent to do that. But he says the king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. So trust in God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. The lions were hungry. Just saying. They didn't eat anything while Daniel was in there. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land. May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. So this isn't Nebuchadnezzar. This is a different king. And yet he had to come to the same recognition. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. What a testament from a king who has never known the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens, on the earth, and he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus, the Persian. So remember, now we know that Daniel survived 3 kings outside of the kingdom of Israel and thrived. Was Daniel free of trauma? No. Did God promise he would not face trauma? No. But he kept his promise that I will stay with you through it all. Navigating trauma, does it guarantee that we're free from stress? No. No, just because you've navigated one trauma, we just talked about this. So turning to God, does it guarantee that we won't be affected by the hardship trauma causes? No. It just, the guarantee there is that God is not going to leave us. But I want to differentiate anxiety from trauma, okay? I know I'm going late. I'm going to rush through the rest of this. Anxiety is the result of trauma. It is the feelings and everything that comes on after. It is one result of trauma. But trauma is the event itself. So let's go through a few more verses of what the Bible has to say. I'm going to scoot through them real quick about trauma. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." David was brilliant. He wrote some beautiful things that really give perspective in relying on God. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted." Could you say that people who are dealing with trauma are brokenhearted? Okay. He is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. We're describing trauma here, aren't we? Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Psalm 30 verse 2 says, "O Lord my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me." So he didn't help him, he healed him. He was damaged, he was traumatically affected, and God healed him. David goes on to say in Psalm 55 verse 22, "Cast your burdens on the Lord, and he will sustain you." It doesn't mean you won't go through the trauma. It means he will be there for you. He will give you the endurance to outlast it. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. Paul says in Romans 12:15, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep." Here is one of the tenets we can take with us and what we can do. We as Christians have a responsibility to one another, to help one another. Do we not? We're to be empathetic, sympathetic, loving, caring, helpful whenever we can. And if we can't do that amongst the people in these walls, how do we do it with people we have no attachment to? We have to. Trauma is not avoidable. It's harsh and it's unrelenting. It takes and it never gives. Ever. To survive it, we need to do several things. First, we need to be in the Word. And we need to be in it now. Because the Word is the plan. And you don't want to be having your worst day and your worst event without a plan. That is a horrible thing to do. I have been in some of the worst situations I can think of without a plan. I've had the training. I don't have the plan. I've muddled through it, but it has been intense. Second, we need to turn to one another, like I just said. The notion that others should not know when we are experiencing our worst events is horrendous. It's funny that as police officers, the 1 to 15-year officer, you good? I'm good. 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 I have a coworker who's been just as much time on the job as me. He started in a whole other state, and him and I have 25 years together. And when I go, "You good?" He goes, "Well, actually," he understands. He understands that he can unload on me, and I can be empathetic. I may not have the solution, but I have the ear, and I can listen to him. And usually, I trade trauma with him. I go, "Oh, this is hard." And I go, "I get it." And it's almost like that whole Neanderthal grunting thing. Like, we get each other. We understand. And we go, "Uh-huh." Christians are supposed to and biblically encouraged to turn to one another for support and help. Are we not? Paul was big on this. I'm not going to get into those scriptures because we're running long as it is. And lastly, and most importantly, we have to turn to God. We saw Daniel in every step of the way relied on God for all of his traumatic experiences, and God helped pull him through it. He was with him every step of the way. Was Daniel in the lion's den alone? No. God sent an angel that did what? Shut the mouths of the lions. While unavoidable, trauma can and must be dealt with. And a lot of times we can't deal with it by tackling it face on, can we? We need time to process it. Psychologists will tell you that the first 30 days offering psychological help has minimal impact. Because after it takes 30 days, it takes at least 2 full sleep cycles 2 full days of sleep cycle, and we're talking 8 hours of sleep, before your brain has properly processed what you've just experienced. Okay? And then your brain can start processing. That's why when we have police officers involved in traumatic events, we have an interview process that includes letting them go home and get rest before they make any kind of statement. Go home, get some rest, come back, then tell us what happened. Because their mind is racing. Can I see my body cam? Can I figure out what happened? And then we also know that within the first 30 days, the mind, if it is a minor traumatic event, the mind has a way of processing it and getting you through it naturally. So they need 30 days in the psychological profession because they need to find out, are you going to process this and get through it, or do you actually need intervention? So God doesn't promise that we won't have hardship. The trauma is unavoidable. Like I just said, it must be dealt with. But God doesn't promise that we won't have hardships. What he does promise is that we'll never go through it alone. That he will be there to get us through it. My favorite verse is Proverbs 24:16. Says, though the righteous fall 7 times, they continue to rise. If you are a follower of God, if you live righteously, no matter how many times you fall, you will continue to rise. Earnest prayer is what we need to make the connection to the only entity that can bear the weight of the things that we can't. So with that being said, let's close out our worship service. Are we singing hymn 329, John? 329. Which stanzas? John, which stanzas are we singing? All 3 or all 4 stanzas?